All right, now let's get started. We are honored to have lead these discussions licensed attorney and professional fiduciary Darby Jones, a member of the Florida and Maryland Bar. Darby serves on the executive council of the Real Property Probate Trust Law section of the Florida Bar. Darby is also the founder and president of the Professional Fiduciary Council of Florida. Darby has served in a variety of fiduciary capacities over the last 30 years, including power of attorney, healthcare surrogate, guardian, and executor. She now focuses on providing consultation for families or individuals dealing with fiduciary matters. Today, she's going to give us a recap of everything that we've talked about this year. So get ready. Darby, what can you share with us today?
Oh, well, I will tell you, we have a lot to cover because if you've had the opportunity to read the description of today's episode, we are going to do sort of a recap of some of the highlights of a lot of the issues that I've covered. So as we proceed today, Chandra is going to be able to post into the chat links and information back to the episodes that will cover the subjects in more detail. So I know you guys are going to have questions and so forth, and I'll try to answer them as best I can. But just keep in mind that most everything I'm covering, there's going to be a lot more detail and good information in the full episode. I'm apologizing in advance for maybe going a little quickly today over a lot of things. First of all, I want to thank again AARP Florida for sponsoring this incredible experience. We are now closing in on the second year of doing Aging Academy. And again, all those episodes from last year and this year are on the website, agingacademy.com, and YouTube, Aging Academy. So if you can't get the link written down, you can find it on YouTube, you can find it on our website. It is true, as Chandra said, my goal and our goal is to give you authentic, just real information, like I'm sitting across the table from you, helping you understand issues that we all are going to face. Most of them we're going to face. We're all aging together. We've never done this before. So no matter where you are, it's going to happen. I don't care what country you're in or what time zone, it's coming your way. So we're all going through this journey together. We're all learning together. And that's the whole purpose of this Aging Academy. So welcome. We're going to talk about the tackling the toughest issues, some of the toughest issues as we age. Why is a POA, power of attorney, important? Do I need a trust or not? How to decide where to live? Should I downsize? Should I move into a facility, a 55 or older community? What about abuse and how to not be vulnerable for exploitation, how to protect myself and what to do? How can I stay safe in my home and what to do when an emergency happens? What kind of common medical conditions are going to start happening and what to be aware of. And then finally, we're going to talk a little bit about divorce. That's a big subject today. And we're just going to talk about some of the good and the bad about what we call gray divorce. So I'm going to bundle those together and we're going to start off with good old estate planning. I know everybody's tired of hearing about estate planning, but there's a reason you hear so much about it. And that's because it is important. I don't care if you don't have much or you just need a simple estate, that's fine. Most people's estates are pretty simple, frankly. But in my opinion, and for those of you that have been here for more than one episode, you know that my opinion is that the power of attorney is the most important estate planning document, and it has nothing to do with your death or estate. Power of attorney is important while you are alive. It's important from today until the day you die, that period of time where if something were to happen to you, even just temporarily, a car accident, or perhaps you go on a cruise around the world and you're gone for 10 months. That power of attorney is going to be able to allow someone that you trust, of course, to step in and take care of your affairs while you may not be available. Again, it could be temporary, it could be permanent, but that is going to avoid a lot of problems. It will avoid you having to have a guardian appointed. which is not the most pleasant situation. And I think we'd all would prefer to pick someone in advance rather than having the court appoint someone through a guardianship or conservatorship process. So power of attorneys are super important. In fact, there are 5 legal documents that make up what we call an estate plan. First is your power of attorney. Second is your last will and testament, healthcare surrogate, living will, and possibly, not always, and not as much as we seem to think, maybe a trust. We're going to talk quickly about those 5 documents. I just spoke a little bit about the power of attorney. There's a whole episode on just power of attorneys. Yes, they're revocable. Yes, you can change them. Yes, you can name more than one person, and you should. Not at the same time, but sequentially. So you can name somebody, and then if that person's not available, then someone else is going to serve. Don't name joint, because it just makes it impractical for 2 people to walk the same and go to the same bank at the same time and sign all the documents at the same time. So it's just not a practical solution. Your healthcare surrogate, that is kind of like a power of attorney. In your state, it may be called something different, but what it is the legal document to allow someone to make healthcare decisions on your behalf. Typically, the standard is if you are able to make the medical profession, if you're in the hospital and your healthcare surrogate is standing there by your bedside, the doctor's standard typically is, can you yourself make an informed decision at that time? And if you can, you're going to make that decision. But if you're unable to make an informed decision, the medical staff is then going to look to your healthcare surrogate for making those decisions. So again, super important, far more important for during this lifetime. They call them estate planning documents, but it's really more like living plan documents. So that's what a healthcare surrogate is. Then you've got your last will and testament. Okay, that's where you decide who's going to get your stuff when you die. And that can get super complicated, or it can be pretty well settled in advance. And again, most people have fairly straightforward estate plans. So obviously you need to have a will in place. Many states, I know here in Florida, if you don't have a will, the statutes have kind of a will in place if nothing else is available. And it typically is kind of what you'd end up doing anyway, more than likely. It goes to your kids. If you don't have kids, it goes to your parents. Parents, it goes to your siblings, etc. So it's really not the end of the world if you don't have a will, because most states are going to have statutes to manage that situation. But of course, obviously, it's better if you do. And then last but not least, oh, well, we have a living will. That's that pull the plug document. That's where if I'm considered unable to survive, I don't want to be put on life support system or ventilation or so forth. And I would encourage everyone, obviously, to have a living will as well. Now, trusts. Trusts are also a document that we've all heard about, probably heard too much about. They are important in certain circumstances. In my personal experience, again, I'm not giving legal advice. I'm not here to tell you in your specific situation what's right for you. But in my experience over the last 25 plus years, trusts are overly used and not necessarily as needed as people may think they are. So just be very careful about falling into having a trust unless you really understand why you're getting a trust and what it actually means to have a trust. And we're going to talk about that a little bit in detail here shortly. But let's go back, and I want to mention one thing about the power of attorney. The Professional Fiduciary Council of Florida was asked by Stetson Law School here in St. Petersburg, Florida, that has an elder law center, and it has a nationwide conference every year. It's very well known for its elder law expertise. They reached out to us to help them put on a certificate course on how to serve as a power of attorney in Florida. Now, while it says in Florida, it will obviously discuss a lot of Florida law. But the truth of the matter is, the duties and the practical side of how to be an agent under a power of attorney is probably about the same, the human aspect of it. The course is offered to the public, and you can either get a certificate or not. It's a lot cheaper if you just want to take the class. No need for the certificate. If you do want the certificate, it will cost a little more, and there's an exam. So if you guys are curious whether you're serving as a power of attorney for someone else, or if you're thinking about, my son or daughter needs to know what to do when the time comes, this is a good course for them to take. It's offered virtually. You can take it on at your own leisure. Keep that in mind. Now, an issue that we have dealt with almost every episode is what I affectionately call our orphaned adults or our solo agers. If you don't have anybody to name in these documents, which I think is a lot of reason why some people don't get their estate. In fact, most people don't have their estate planning done. And I'm sure some of us in our audience today don't have their estate planning done. And part of the challenge is you don't have anybody to name. So you're going to go to the lawyer and you're going to be asked, who would you like to be your personal representative in your will? Who would you like to be your agent under your power of attorney? And you don't know who to name. So here's my advice, and this is very serious advice. Right now, at our age, if you don't have anyone in your life that you can trust, and trust, believe me, is probably the most important quality, then you need to make it your job to find a team, find a person, develop, cultivate, and locate those relationships. They may be right in front of you and you don't realize it. Doesn't have to be a family member. And sometimes it's not, the family members are sometimes the worst people to serve in those roles. It's got to be somebody that you trust, that can act independently and is available. So in your bingo group, your book group, the ladies at the hairdresser, the people you walk with every day, at the gym or at the playing golf or whatever you do, pickleball, somebody, just start making it a conscious effort to maybe seek out people because they may themselves also need someone to look out for them. And you could develop a way to communicate with each other, a daily email, a phone call, whatever it is. There's all kinds of ways to cultivate and strengthen that relationship. So for those of you out there that don't have anybody, try to make that your job. Try to really work at that because you're going to need somebody, right? We all do. Y'all don't have to be best friends. You don't have to visit every day, but you just have to have that commonality, that common concern for each other when it comes to an emergency or whether they need to come in and help you temporarily. They might not need to do it personally, but they need to hire a caregiver or be in charge of calling your family or whatever it is in your circumstances that they can come and help you with. Okay, Joanne, will a trust protect adult children from commingling assets? That's a great question. That's a little bit beyond what I'm able to address today. That's a good question for your estate planning attorney. It's not necessarily a trust that would do that. So I suggest that you ask that question with your estate planner. It's a good question. Here's another. Put that one at the end, Chandra. That's a good question about the Florida POA expiration. Okay, so let's talk about trust for just a little bit more. Like I said, there are times where trusts are very important, and there are lots of kinds of trusts. There's almost as many kinds of trusts as there are makes of automobiles. Okay, so it really depends on your circumstances and your life, whether you really need a trust or not. It's not about how much money you have. Okay, so for example, you have a lady working at the local grocery store. Okay, she's a checkout girl. She has a daughter who has cerebral palsy. Her only income, she lives paycheck to paycheck at that grocery store. But Based on her employment, she's got a $200,000 life insurance policy. Well, she needs a trust, not a living trust, but just a trust in her will that says if I die, that money goes into a trust to take care of my daughter. Because if she died without one, that money, where's it going to go? Her daughter has cerebral palsy. They'd have to somehow scramble around, appoint a guardian, and now you've got people who you don't even know being appointed to take care of your daughter. So in her situation, she'd need a trust. Again, had nothing to do with her amount of money or that she's wealthy or not. It had to do with the fact that there's someone after her, after she dies, that's going to need care, whether that's a spouse, grandchild, whatever. That's a good reason to consider having a trust. It's generally called a special needs trust. In your state, it could have a different name, but that would be one reason to look for a trust. Now, there are many others. If you have a lot of money, there's going to be tax planning that you need to do. There's some asset protection that can be accomplished through trusts. To go back to that question earlier. So in your state, with your estate planning attorney, they should be able to identify whether you need a trust and what kind of trust that should be. The advantages are trusts give you some kind of control, takes care of surviving beneficiaries if necessary. Supposedly, they avoid probate. You're going to hear more about that in a minute. They provide a little bit of asset protection when on certain assets. They're private. They're a private document. In Florida, they're not necessarily filed with the court, so people don't necessarily have access to what your trust says or doesn't say. And they're hard to attack. So if you have family members who might want to somehow attack your estate plan, trusts are a little bit harder to attack than a will. Of course, a will is pretty secure unless you have been succumbed to undue influence or someone's put a gun to your head to sign a will, which can be proven in court, of course. The disadvantages of having a trust are the cost. Of course, there's a cost to having one drawn up. There's a cost to reviewing it and paying for the attorney, etc. There's a cost to ongoing management of the trust. You're going to have to pay a trustee to manage that trust. You're going to have to find a trustee who's willing to manage that trust. If there's not enough money in that trust, it's going to be hard for you to find someone willing to manage that trust. They can be complex. If you've got the gazillions of dollars, your trustee is going to have to understand all the tax implications and liability issues inside of that trust. On the other hand, if it's meant to take care of someone who's really in either medical or psychological needs, that trustee is going to need to understand how to deal with that. It could be a drug addiction, it could be a disease, it could be a disability. So that trustee is going to have to be able to understand how to manage that trust during that person's lifetime. It doesn't necessarily avoid probate. That would not be a reason to get a trust, because of all the expenses and the ongoing maintenance of trust, it's not worth it. In Florida, probate's not that expensive. In fact, probate can be your friend. We're going to talk about probate in just a second with my famous stick figure picture. And every state is different. So you need to be careful that that I'm not, I'm based in Florida. Obviously, we have a lot of estate planning going on in this state. So our estate planning schemes are may be a little more complicated than in your state, but definitely talk to your estate planning attorney. And how to find an attorney. Okay, you want to look at your local bar association, maybe look at your local, what they call estate planning council. There are lots of those around the country. See what attorneys actually practice estate planning. Make sure that they've got a little bit of gray hair. They didn't just graduate last week. Also make sure on their website that they don't do everything. Okay, they're not doing divorces and bankruptcies and real estate and estate planning. Find an attorney that really has a focus and has been doing this day to day for a long time. Now, elder law is different than estate planning. Elder law's focus primarily is disability and Medicaid planning. benefits and disability planning. So if you're looking for long-term care solutions, or perhaps not yet, but you want to plan for the expense of long-term care, that's when you want to go talk to an elder law attorney. That's what their expertise is all about. Now, let's pull up our stick figure real quickly, if you don't mind. I'm going to go through this fast, okay? So if it's complicated, there is an episode called Demystifying Estate Planning, where I will go into this in much more detail. But I get questions all the time about what probate is. Probate is, the definition is the court oversight of a person's will, okay? And in my opinion, I like to have oversight. And trust, there is no oversight by the court of a trust. So what goes through probate? You can own things, at least for today on planet Earth, 3 ways, okay? I can own stuff in my own name. That's the person on the left. I own all my stuff in my own name. My checking account, my house, my car, my bank account, whatever it is, it's in my name alone. Or I can own things jointly. I can own things jointly with my spouse. I can own things jointly with my kids, my friends. We can have a joint checking account. We can have we own a business together, whatever it is, it's jointly titled. Or I own things under a contract. K is just a term for a letter for contract. And contracts are things like IRAs. You have signed during your lifetime who is the beneficiary of that IRA. Or your 401k, you've signed who's the beneficiary. Or a trust. A trust is just a contract. You're entering into a trust yourself. It's a Darby Jones trust, and Darby Jones is going to sign that contract. Or insurance. I have life insurance. At my death, the beneficiary is my daughter. I've signed that contract. Or an annuity. An annuity is a contract, what you've signed, and that's where that asset is going to go at your death. So the only bucket, you've got 3 buckets here: my own stuff, stuff I own jointly, and stuff I own in a contract. The only stuff that's going to go through probate is the stuff in your own name. That's it. That's it. That's what your will is going to control. So if I died tomorrow and my will said give everything to Chandra, she would only get what's in my name alone. Anything that I own jointly with someone else, or any contract that I said in contract goes to somebody else, is going to go that way. It doesn't matter what the will says. The will only controls what's in my name. And if that will says everything goes to Chandra, those are the only things that are going to go to Chandra. Shame on Chandra, because I got everything jointly with my boyfriend, right? So again, this can get pretty complicated. I just wanted to help you understand that probate really only impacts what your assets are. And if you have outside of that done some other things and signed things at the bank, pay on death, or contracts with the annuities, those are not going to be affected by your will. So just by saying, oh yeah, everything in my will goes to you, that might not be accurate. Okay, so we're going to move on to the next subject here. My gosh, we're already almost at 1:30. Next subject is where to live. Aging in place, moving to a facility, going to a 55 or older community. What is right for you and what isn't right for you? And this is an important question. And a lot of it is personal to you. Look at how you're living now. Look at what makes you happy now. What are the surroundings and social activities and daily activities that you enjoy today? Because it's doubtful that that's going to change substantially. Okay, so keep in mind, look in that mirror and be honest with yourself about who you are. And I'm going to talk a little bit about that throughout the rest of this presentation. My experience and philosophy with my clients over the years is I want them to stay home as long as possible, as long as it's safe, and as long as they can afford it. I'm going to keep them at home. And there are a lot of ways to do that. You've got modifications, you've got caregiving, you've got technology There's all kinds of ways to make it reasonable and doable to stay home if that's your desire. Now, there are other options out there. And today, more than, and there'll probably be more 5 years from today, but there's co-housing agreements. There's over 55 communities. We're going to post a website here called Village to Village, where a community actually not affiliated. You can just live in a community where you pay a little fee and everybody volunteers to help each other, take to the doctor, bring soup when you're sick, all that, which is fabulous. I mean, to me, that's one of the most heartwarming trends that I'm seeing. Be careful going into a community, a 55 older community, because the costs are only going to increase, the HOAs, the maintenance fees, the insurance, etc. Also, there is a certain amount of isolation. If you're in a neighborhood right now, you're going to see lots of varieties of generations and activities going on. And a 55 or older community is going to be much more of a isolation and a much more monochrome social environment. You may like that. Just be aware that that's one of the things to consider. You're also going to be paying for a lot of amenities that you may not really take advantage of. It may be nice to drive by that pool or that tennis court, but do you ever use it? Or all that nice landscaping? But you're paying for all those amenities. So keep in mind, if you're not really going to all of a sudden become that sort of lifestyle person, don't go there. And you're not going to all of a sudden be somebody, even though the brochure is going to want you to think that, and they're trying to sell you on that. That's where I want you to keep looking in that mirror and looking where you are right now. And that's where you're happy. And that's where you've been happy. If you're happy, let's hope you all are happy. That's what you're going to be comfortable in going forward. The other, we go in a little further into a facility, an actual assisted living facility in which there is very little assistance, by the way. The downsides of living in a facility are the decline in your emotional well-being. And a lot of that's just the isolation and the disruption in your life. The promise of personalized care that doesn't really match the reality or the brochure. The cost may become unsustainable. Your physical health declines faster in an institutional setting due to infections, colds, skin breakdowns, poor hygiene, UTIs, etc. It tends to allow for a very sedentary lifestyle. At home, you're going to have to get up and go get the newspaper out of the driveway. You're going to have to get up and clean the kitchen dishes. Okay. That's mobility. Those are things that aren't going to happen if you're in a facility. Your nutrition is not monitored very well. And of course, you might not be monitoring your nutrition either very well. We'll get to that in our mini med. But nutrition is not monitored very well. There's a loss of dignity, especially when you are now having to have assistants showering, and that shower room might be kind of a public kind of an area. Your sense of an abandonment may increase some depression. So you want to ask questions when you go to these facilities and ask what's included in the basic price. And you're going to be surprised how little that is, because as your care increases, they're going to increase your monthly bills. And you want to know how they determine that. What happens with a care plan? Do they even have care plans? How are they staffed? And how do they manage termination? Or if you want to amend your agreement or you want to leave, do you get your deposit back, etc. It can get very complicated. So do not go willy-nilly into an assisted living facility or a CCRC, which is a continuing care retirement community, without doing a lot of soul searching, looking in that mirror, and also looking at it from a financial standpoint. My feeling is in these continuing care retirement communities, it's very often you have to pay this big lump sum and they're going to take care of you forever. Well, here's the problem. What if you don't like it there? And what if they don't like you? And what if you decide you don't like the food and you're kind of stuck? So if you can keep to a month to month, if you have to go to a facility, and there are some excellent facilities, don't get me wrong. It's just my experience is I don't get calls with nice experiences. My clients tend to have been in a problem. So my point of view tends to be a little bit more salty than it ought to be. So keep in mind that they're not always what they're cracked up to be or what the salesperson is telling you is going to happen. So just be smart. Um, so let's move into the finances and what to look for and what to watch out for. And again, we have an episode called Watch Out for Dangerous Financial Products. And I think Chandra may be able to stick that in the chat here. But be very careful with reverse mortgages. And I mean, very careful. Don't over-insure yourself. Avoid or be very careful with annuities. Um, and if it's too good to be true, guess what? It's too good to be true. Try to find a fee-only financial advisor who's transparent about their costs and expenses and whose duties are that of a high fiduciary. A lot of types of fiduciaries, okay? That word is used very vaguely. There are lots of financial advisors who do not have the highest fiduciary duty that's required. It's called best interest. And you have a right to ask. You have a right to ask that in writing that they have the best interest fiduciary duty in mind for your portfolio. Also, there's a broker check website where you can go to called Broker Check. So you can look up your financial advisor in there to see if there's any past situations, any lawsuits or criminal activity that has been involved with that guy. So be careful. And and part of that team building that I told you to find that friend or that confidant or that fiduciary, you also want to find an attorney, a CPA, and a financial advisor, all of whom you trust and feel comfortable with. And at this point in your life, it may be different than the one you had. Okay, not all financial advisors are familiar with the aging season that we're in. This is much more of a tax planning. You've got IRAs, you've got Roths, you've got 401ks, you've got pension plans, you've got some of the tax implications of utilizing those funds can get complicated. And perhaps the financial advisor you had isn't familiar, hasn't been around that kind of season of an investor. So just be sure that they're capable of those kinds of financial situations that you're in now. I'm going to talk a minute about abuse and neglect. Okay, abuse is when something is done to someone. Okay, and neglect is when the person themselves are neglecting themselves or the person around is neglecting them. The absence of doing something for someone. And victims, and this is if you, let's say your neighbor, your friend, your family member, the victims are always afraid of sharing this. They're afraid of retribution. They feel guilty. They're embarrassed, or worse, they have nobody else, so they're afraid to say anything because that's the only person in their life that's willing to even be with them, and it might be the abuser. So keep those red flags in mind. The abusers won't talk about it. I'm sorry, the victims won't talk about it. The abusers tend to interrupt them when you start trying to ask questions. You might see a lot of visits to the ER. The abuser usually says, oh, they're very accident prone, or she tends to slip a lot, she falls a lot. Those are the kind of excuses they make. A lot of signs of neglect are dental issues and hygiene issues and weight. If you see a lot of weight loss or a lot of lack of hygiene. So just keep your eyes open around your colleagues, your friends, your neighbors, because that might be happening right in front of you and you're not really aware of it. Every state, I'm sure, I know Florida does, has a hotline to call to report, and it's usually anonymous, to report any suspicious neglect or abuse of a vulnerable adult. So look around and see what number that is in your state. I'm sure you have it, and it is helpful. It is very helpful. Okay, so now be ready for emergencies. This was a fun episode. I had a really good conversation with an EMT, and he said, look, first thing you got to do is have that information on your refrigerator. And we have these red emergency little envelopes. If you email Chandra, we will be happy to mail one of these to you. You can put your information in these, fold it up, and put it in your wallet, your purse, and also on the refrigerator. They want to have your name, date of birth, what medications you're currently on, who is your power of attorney, who is your healthcare surrogate. It could be a neighbor, it could be a friend. Do you have a pet in the house? Who's the vet? Do you have any allergies? Do you have any metal in your body? And your DNR. Do not resuscitate. Should also be on your refrigerator. Every emergency medical technician is trained to look for that information on your refrigerator. I have been told that if they don't see it on your refrigerator, they'll open the door and look inside. I'm not sure if I'd want to keep it inside, but anyway, keep it on your refrigerator, get that done. Could be an envelope, put on the outside in case of emergency, whatever. But also you want to make sure that you have several copies of that information. So if you do go to the hospital, you've got it with you, because if you hand it to somebody in the ER, it will disappear and then you don't have it. So make several copies. Don't give your only copy to the people at the hospital. And don't give the copy to the EMTs either. The EMTs show up, they're going to get you stabilized, they're going to get you ready to get into the ambulance. They're not going to get in the ambulance. You're going to go to the hospital in the ambulance. They're going to go somewhere else. So that paperwork, if you don't hang on to it or give it to the ambulance, it's going to get lost. So make sure it goes with the ambulance. You want to make your address obvious outside. Make sure you've got a light on. Make sure also you can call your local EMT office or county emergency organization and let them know what the where you've hidden a key if you have, or if you have a little lockbox on your front door, you can give them the code to that so they'll know what it is to get in, so that it will be in their system, so they'll be able to get into your home without bashing down your door. If they do bash down your door, they will call the police and the police will come and secure your home. So you don't have to worry about somebody coming in and stealing all your gold bullion or anything, if they have to push down the door. But he did tell me, whatever you do, don't call 911 if you don't truly need 911. So if you have, let's say you're watching your mother and she just kind of slips out of the chair and now she's on the floor. She didn't hit herself, she's not injured, but you can't pick her up by yourself, which is totally fine. You probably shouldn't try to. There's always going to be a non-emergency number. So you can call and get someone to come out and help you, get your mom up off the floor, or some non-emergent situation. Because every time you call 911, you're keeping that crew from going to another possible true emergency. And there's also wellness checks. You can call if you're worried about your mom. She lives in Ohio, you're in Mississippi, you're worried, you can call and say, hey, can you just go do a wellness check? I'm worried about my mom. I've been calling, she's not answering. Okay, so those are all available options than calling 911. And also do not think that calling an ambulance is going to get you to bypass the line at the ER. That does not work. Okay. When you get to the ER, even if it's in an ambulance, even now you've wasted that time of the ambulance staff, you're not going to be put in the front of the line. Your wound or issue is going to be assessed just like everybody else's, and you're going to be put in line as according to priority. So as much as we'd like to think that that gets us to the front of the line, it really doesn't. And again, don't give everybody your paperwork. Take an extra copy. Now I'm going to quickly go through our mini med school. I might breeze through this a little fast because we are kind of running out of time. And that episode was awesome. Again, it was very in detail, and I really enjoyed preparing for that particular episode. But I call it my mini med school for us old folks. So one of the things I found out is that only 1% of physicians in the United States are qualified or certified in geriatric medicine. I find that just amazing and not good, and not a good way. There should be over 30,000 of them, and we have about 7,000 nationwide. So finding a geriatric doctor is probably not going to work wherever you live. Even here in St. Petersburg, we used to be known as Heaven's Waiting Room here, right? And I still have a hard time finding geriatric doctors here in St. Petersburg. And a lot of the reason, of course, is it's not a highly remunerative practice. So it's not super attractive to doctors. So there are a lot of issues that you have to then take in mind when you go to the doctor, because they're not going to be trained in geriatric issues. And some of those issues are that most doctors think all old people are the same, that we're all, going to be a little crazy, that we might all have the same health concerns or issues. And obviously that's not the case. I mean, there can be some 95-year-olds that are smarter and more with it than I am. And there can be a 95-year-old that is completely unable to have mental capacity. So it's a wide array of medical conditions that'll happen. Plus, we've had this long history of all kinds of health issues over the last, 6 or 7 decades. So we have a more complex medical situation than your average patient. What are the most common causes of death? It's strokes, cancer, and heart disease. Those are the 3 top. What are the most common medical diagnoses? Heart attacks, congestive heart failure, cancer, diabetes, arthritis, dementia, high blood pressure, high cholesterol, and falls. Okay. What are the most common reasons to go to the doctor? And I'm talking about our group. Okay. This is for the elderly or aged or older folks. Flus and colds, falls, UTIs, and pneumonia. What are the most common reasons for an ER visit? Now listen up. Falls are the most common, car accidents, and medication mismanagement. Medication mismanagement, in fact, is the most common reason for readmission into a hospital. Very often, okay, we a lot to talk about here, but very often, I think the episode for this one is My Mom Fell, Now What? That was an episode. It's got a lot of good information in there, folks. Please go back and watch that one. If you go to the hospital, you're going to be discharged, likely on a weekend, which I don't approve of, but you're going to be discharged on the weekend because they want to empty it out and get ready for Monday. And you're going to be given all kinds of new prescriptions, maybe. And that's when it happens. You're going to go and you're going to get these new prescriptions. You're going to come home and you've got your old prescriptions and they're going to get all mixed up. You don't know which ones are new or old or which ones to take. So that is a real common problem. So be careful. Make sure you understand all of that before you leave the hospital, because getting that information after you're out those front doors is not as easy. And this is another reason why you want to have someone really good named as your healthcare surrogate, okay, or your power of attorney. Because 90% of us want to die at home, and only 20% of us ever end up doing that. And a lot of that reason is because our healthcare surrogate, power of attorney, is not capable of standing up and telling the doctor, no, we don't need one more test. We don't need one more procedure. We need to come home. I want to come home and I'm going to have hospice or palliative care help us, because I don't want my mom to die here in the hospital. So you're healthcare surrogate, and you need to communicate that to your healthcare surrogate, because doctors are trained to keep trying and keep trying. And that's their oath, that they have to keep trying to fix. But there just comes a point where someone's got to step in and say, okay, that's enough. And don't forget, our medical system is a profit-making operation. So that's always in the back of the mind that you want to keep in mind. And don't be afraid of hospice. Hospice is an absolutely fabulous service. And DNRs, it means do not resuscitate. It doesn't mean do not treat. So don't worry that if you're at home and you have a DNR, that the EMTs are not going to help you or treat you. It really is just a do not resuscitate. Okay, lastly, we're going to talk about divorce. And I can probably go through this fairly quickly. And then I've got some financial information I want to go through, and we'll be wrapping it up. And I'm going to go quickly. And again, the divorce episode, very thorough. So if any of this resonates with you, please go back and watch the episode. But clearly, we all know that there is this epidemic of gray divorce going on. Primarily, women are getting divorced. And I think that the reasons are, I think, fairly self-evident. We've got a lot of the empty nest syndrome going on. Our lifespans are longer than they used to be. If you met a child today, their average lifespan is going to be 105 years old. Their average lifespan. So we're all living longer. So sometimes we're just ready to move on and have a different phase of life. The marriage, the relationship maybe has come to a productive end, and it might be on both sides. Women are more able financially to survive, even though it's still quite common that the woman is in financially worse off after a divorce than a male. Social attitudes are much more open and able to accept divorces. So being single isn't necessarily a stigma that it used to. The teamwork of raising children is gone. So there may not be any common challenges or goals between the two of you. Retirement is also a big deal. Retirement can come and hit everyone like a ton of bricks. It's now what? And you've both had jobs, you've both been apart from each other 40 more hours a week. Now you got to figure out how to be together all those hours a week. So you got to reconnect, you got to communicate, you got to really schedule time for yourself. You got to schedule time for the two of you, and you've got to schedule time for the other person. So you've got to, I know it's hard to talk about things that are difficult and challenging and uncomfortable and embarrassing, but that's what it's going to take. If you're willing and want to keep the relationship working, because retirement is a reset. You know, it's a complete reset of your relationship. Technology is also makes it a lot easier nowadays to facilitate a divorce, of course, or to cause a divorce. People are reconnecting on Facebook. They're finding old friends from long ago. Attorneys are available online to help with the process. So a lot of the actual act of getting divorce is getting in front of your face more often than it ought to be. But again, communication is really important. Financially, okay, some financial issues I just want to touch on here. Again, when we've been to, let's say you're together and you're thinking about the financial fears of being on your own. I don't know if you can hear my dog shaking her collar here, but the financial issues are complicated. Okay, you've been intertwined for how many decades now? And maybe one of you or the other of you have had some secret debt or some secret issues going on that you don't want anybody to find out about. Maybe you've got some years of silence about something that is now going to come out and you're afraid about that. So it's totally realistic to have some financial anxiety about divorce or even about staying together. That some of that's going to have to come out because now you're retired and you've got to plan for this season of life, which is a very different mindset than it was when you were accumulating wealth and taking care of kids and grandkids and so forth. So just keep in mind that conversation is going to be tough, but depending on what your end goal is, you need to pull off that Band-Aid and have it. So my last conversation I want to have, and that leaves us a little bit of time for some questions, I hope, is I'm going to go back to what I said about looking in that mirror. And I mean this with all my heart. We are all different. Every face I'm looking at is different. Everybody's in a different situation. You know what makes you happy, hopefully. And if you don't, this is what I recommend you do. I did this myself. I am looking to move into retirement myself and just do consulting and do these seminars, which I love to do. And I needed to figure out how to fill my day. Like what now? What do I do? You know, what am I going to do now that I'm grown up? So I think about two things that really hit me. One is, and I've shared this with you before, What would your 95-year-old self tell you today to do? Think about that. Think about what would your 90-year-old self say? You need to be doing this, Darby, because this is going to happen. The other thing that hit me like a ton of bricks was think back to when in your life, and I hope some of this doesn't resonate, because think back in your life when you were happy, carefree, riding your bike down the street, nothing's bothering you. You're not worried about your paycheck. You're not worried about the world. You're enjoying life. What were you doing at that time? What was it you actually were doing that made you happy? It could be camping. It could be playing tennis. It could be swimming. It could be baking. It could be sewing. It could be reading. It could be coloring. It could be anything. It could be doing nothing. But whatever that was in your life, where you look back and think about when you were really happy, you need to find that. Okay. You need to find that and build that life around you. Because that's what's important now. And that you're going to be okay, financially and otherwise, you're going to be okay. Is divorce right for you? Maybe not. I've given you some things to think about. Is your financial plan in order? Maybe not. So you've got the motivation now to maybe just sit down and think about it. Work on it. Check that box off. Get that power of attorney in place. Find somebody that's going to be your confidant and your person that's going to be by your side at that hospital. Don't do it alone. Nobody can do this alone. Okay. And you shouldn't have to do it alone. There's a people right around you that need the same thing you do. So, so I'm hoping this is encouraging and inspiring, and turn off the media. Don't let all the TikTok and the Facebook and the memes and the advertisements suck you into buying things or moving somewhere or thinking that your lifestyle should be this when it's not that. Okay. They're just trying to sell you something. Okay. You need to just be you. And whatever that is okay. Okay. Totally okay. We don't all have to be running marathons or living the good life or traveling around the world. Okay. It's okay. Whatever makes you happy is all that really matters. So I'm gonna see if I've got time for some questions here. I'm hoping we have some good ones.
I know, you ready? Okay, so you said to hold this one to the end. The Florida Power of Attorney, 2004, can it be automatically outdated just due to time passage? Do they
Well,
expire?
right.
Does
And
the
that's a
power of
good
attorney
question.
expire?
And that usually goes with any estate planning document, really. They don't really get outdated, but they should be updated, because it's just like a will. If you write a will back in 2004, it's still valid. That power of attorney is still valid, but the person that you named may not be appropriate. And the laws have evolved to such that the 2-page power of attorney that you had in 2004 is probably 15 pages today. Okay, so all the stuff that's happened during those years that we want to put in those documents for preparation and make it more strong, it's worth it to get updated documents. I would highly recommend that. But no, it's not outdated, to answer that question.
If you have multiple people listed as a power of attorney, say you have a first and then a successor after that, if someone declines, does it have to be in writing and legally recognized?
Well, again, that's a good legal question, and it kind of depends on what state you're in, to be honest. It's a good idea if someone is named as a successor in any document and they don't want to do it, they should definitely send a letter to that person who named them to say, look, I appreciate you naming me, but I'm not going to do it. But that should be all you really have to do. But again, every state's a little different, but I would guess I would err on the side of caution and put it in writing and send that person a letter saying, thank you, but no, thank you. And also share the information page or send us an email. I've got a piece of paper that I use for fiduciary information that I fill out for every client. So whoever's named as your power of attorney or your healthcare surrogate or your trustee, they should know who is your doctor, who's your attorney, where do you have your investments, what's the name of your bank, all that stuff. And I've got a form, very simple. It's not a 3-ring binder with 14 tabs. It's just a piece of paper that will at least give your fiduciary a quick start on where to go. And we can either share it or you can email it or
I
whatever.
just shared it, and then I'll also put it as a link, as a resource for this recording on the Aging Academy website.
Okay.
Can you give the quick 30-second, what is the difference between an irrevocable trust versus a revocable trust, and why would anybody want one?
Okay, again, whether you need one or not is definitely a question about your situation with your estate planning attorney. But an irrevocable trust is exactly what it says. You cannot revoke it. So if you once you make it, that's it. And you can't change it. Now, in some states, there are some provisions in those irrevocable trusts that you can change. But for the most part, it's assumed that you're putting these assets in that trust and they're gone forever. Okay, so you can't change it. So obviously, that's something you should enter into very carefully. And that you don't see a lot of irrevocable trusts for a reason. But in your situation, there may be. So that's definitely a question for your estate planning attorney.
What if your power of attorney moves out of the country? Can they still be your power of attorney from Europe?
Well, as a matter of fact, good question. I have been power of attorney for people all over the country. And you don't necessarily have to live next door to the person for whom you're power of attorney. There are things like certified care managers that you can put in place. You can put in place good caregivers who are going to report to you. You've got technology that you can put in place. You've got FaceTime you can put in place. So there are a lot, there are ways that you can do that. In fact, the course that I talked about from Stetson University will talk about how you can continue to be someone's power of attorney or there for you at a distance. It's totally doable. Is it ideal? No. Of course, you want me living right next door, right? But that's not, and that's very rarely the case. So yes, it is doable, but most people don't know how to do it. So I'm happy to help build the structure for that to totally be doable. Daily money managers, you've got certified care managers, you've got people who can be your eyes and ears and help with that easily. Yes.
And I know we're right up on the hour, but we have a couple more quick questions. So let me go through them if you don't mind, Darby, staying over a minute. If you have to drop off, we understand. Be sure to answer the survey questions that you'll get from AARP. This is our last episode for 2025. So you're going to have to check us out online on YouTube and agingacademy.com to watch all of those episodes from the last 2 years while you enjoy the holidays, while you're cooking your turkey. You can listen to Darby talk to you about making disastrous financial decisions. All right.
And
So go
so
ahead.
PK, yes, the Stetson course is available remotely. It's a virtual class, so you can
Yeah.
be anywhere and take that. And Stephanie, we're hoping to be back in 2026. I want everybody out there to email AARP and tell them you want me back, okay? Because that's going to be the key. They look at the audience and the enthusiasm that's around this, which is good. And Joanne, your question again, that's for your attorney. It really depends on what state you're in. And there are a lot of pieces to your question about how to protect marital assets from children and so forth. So I'm not able to answer that question in this setting. I'm sorry. Um, oh, we
Yeah.
need a link
And
for the Stetson event. We can
yep,
put.
let me throw that up there. I'm going to put it in the chat once again, and I'll add that to as a resource on the website. Does every I'm guessing, does everything go through probate is the question? Because it says, does every will go through probate? So I'm guessing, does everything go
Nope.
through probate?
Only the stuff that you own in your name alone. Your shoes and socks, your car, if it's in your name, your house is in your name, that's going to go through probate. If it's not, if I own something jointly with somebody, or I have a contract where it says it goes to so-and-so at my death, that does not go through probate. But I prefer having probate because I like having the court supervision. I like making sure that my personal representative is doing the right thing and giving the money to the right people. So I'm a fan of probate. I think this perception that probate is some monster in the closet to be avoided is very misunderstood. Very misunderstood.
Well, thank you all again. A few folks have dropped their emails in the chat to get the red envelopes. So I'll send you an email, and if you'll just reply to my email with your mailing address, that way I can get that actually in the physical mail to you. You'll get an envelope in your mailbox. So look for an email from me, just asking for your mailing address. Have a wonderful rest of the year. Happy 2026, friends. And
We'll see you next year.
see you then. Thanks,
Bye.
everyone.
Thank you.
Have a great
Have a good
afternoon.
one.